Thank you very much for everyone for joining us tonight at Dearborn Public Library. I'm very honored to be talking with Armen Keteyian, very famed sports journalist. First, we have a couple announcements. If Be sure and join the fun. We have our Oscar contest for this year going. We have lots of great prizes, including a book, Welcome to Pawnee, passes a local theater, uh, lots of great prizes. So just take a look at our website, dearbornlibrary.org, and so you can make your predictions. And also on March 11th, we'll be talking with Susan Morrison about her new biography of Lorne Michaels. It's entitled Lorne, the Man Who Invented Saturday Night Live. So go ahead and check the library website, dearbornlibrary.org, and we'll to register for either the Zoom link or to attend in person. So I'm very pleased and touched to be talking with Armen Keteyian tonight. He's widely regarded one of the best investigative journalists of his generation. I've seen him on ABC News, CBS Sports, CBS News, Real Sports with Brian Gumbo, 60 Minutes, and 60 Minutes Sports. And he also did a turn with The Athletic for the New York Times. He's won 11 Emmy Awards over his career, and he's written or co-written over 13 books, 6 of them New York Times bestsellers. So I want to please join us and welcome Mr. Armen Keteyian. Thank you.
And thank you.
So in the acknowledgement section of your book, you talk about how hard it was to put this book together, how much work involved. Can you talk about why or what you get out of it, I guess, what you get from it?
Well, I think it was complicated because the state of college sports right now is changing. Sometimes John Talty, my co-author, and I would often laugh about it. Not that it was funny, but it would change weekly, daily, hourly, because there'd be one lawsuit, or somebody would change schools, or a coach would resign because he decided he no longer wanted to deal with the chaotic world of college football. And for me, just to give your audience an idea, back in 2013, I had co-authored a book called The System, which at that time was a deep dive into the chaotic state of big time college football, with realignment and a lot of big money, the playoffs coming in. And that was literally child's play compared to what John Talty and I were dealing with the price. And when you're on this freight train that is barreling down a track, and you really have no idea where it's going, and the destination is changing sometimes daily, hourly, it takes all the journalistic skills that I have, which are pretty considerable at this point in my life. And John Talty is half my age, but he reminds me a lot of myself because he's pretty obsessive and he's a relentless reporter. This book was, of the 13 that I've written, it was probably the most difficult because the sport was changing, literally sometimes by the hour. And fortunately, we were able to kind of grab on. And by the end, we had a pretty clear picture of what the future was going to be, which I think is going to end up in the courts. But it was this rollicking ride for about a year and a half, and I was like, whoa, I didn't really know if I signed up for this, but in the end, I'm very proud of this book. I think the reviews have been great. The The Amazon reviews have been great, and I think it really depicts in a very critical moment in time for a lot of people that were trying to understand what was going on in the world of college sports. It really explains it in a very compelling, entertaining way.
Well, as a college football fan and also a librarian, I figure uh, I want to bring information, bring it, what's in the news to people to help them understand it. And I guess my next question, but what is specifically NIL, name, image, likeness?
Basically, NIL it's the byproduct of a long legal fight that began. Um, there's a chapter called Oppenheimer with Sonny Vaccaro back in 2007 when he's, as some of your audience knows, probably the most legendary, visionary sports marketer in the history of college basketball. He was the person that was behind the decision by Nike to pay college coaches in basketball, which changed the game. He was also the person that was tremendously influential in the first Michael Jordan contract that Nike signed with Michael, which was a um, revolutionary deal. And most importantly, Sonny was the driving force behind the O'Bannon lawsuit. Ed O'Bannon, who played at UCLA, won a national championship in 1995. The O'Bannon lawsuit was the landmark case that eventually led to the Alston case, which led to the House case, which led to the Supreme Court ruling in 2021, unanimous, that basically said that the NCAA was a cartel that was doing everything it could to undermine and um, subsume the wages of their labor force. And that led to NIL. So NIL is basically now, for the first time in 100 years, student athletes have the right to promote and sell their brand, their name, their image and likeness. They're no longer under the auspices or the guidance of an athletic department. So it's a revolutionary landmark moment in college sports where, for those that have been following this, you now have quarterbacks who are singularly the most influential, probably player on the field for power 4 or 5 teams. They're in the market for $6 to $8 million a year. If they're a graduate transfer that's had very successful career at another school, if they go to an SEC school or a Big Ten school, they can now command $6 to $8 million a year. So this is a brave new world, and the reason that the book has the word chaos in the subtitle of the book is because it's so chaotic right now. Between the transfer portal, athletes literally having the ability to go out into free agency twice a year, but then really talented athletes who have shown an ability to perform on the field are now some of the most um, they're some of the most wanted um, performers in college sports. And so when you see SEC schools or Big Ten schools go, well, you know what? If we get to the championship game, it's worth 20 or $30 million or more to our school. Do we want to pay a quarterback $4, $5, $6 million so he can have his brand be part of our program? That's what NIL is. It's basically the ability to sell your name into the public space. And just like Dan, you could, I could, tennis players can, other golfers can, but for the longest time, the basic driving force of college sports, basketball players and football players were withheld from that because the NCAA fought tooth and nail to keep the student athlete charade um, going within the courts.
Yeah, so would you consider the transfer portal in a form of free agency?
Oh, no question. And it's, to me, NIL is NIL is understandable. NIL is somewhat predictable within um, the basic ground rules of college sports. What has really upended and turned college football and basketball into a free for all is the portal. So, for your audience to understand, in the NFL, free agency happens once a year under a very finite set of circumstances. So for the Lions, for example, if a wide receiver or Jameis Winston or Jameson Williams wants to go into free agency at some point in time, that's all plotted out within the organization. But what happens now in college football is in December and in April, these very these windows open up. They were 30 days, now they're 15 days. They open up where you might have a very talented wide receiver or a very talented cornerback that you have been developing in your program over the last 2 years. And all of a sudden, coming out of spring practice in April, he's not starting. So what does he do? He goes into the portal. And the portal is basically free agency where other schools can say, okay, John Smith, we want to pay you X amount of dollars to come to pick a school, Clemson. So a transfer from Michigan State to Clemson, it's all about the money. And what drives the coaches crazy is they think they have a team on the field, but when the portal opens, it's chaos, because if a player doesn't feel like he's being treated fairly or isn't developed or doesn't have as much NIL money that he thinks he deserves, that window is now open for him to leave the program. And from a coaching perspective, you just want to beat your head on a table, because what you think is your team suddenly isn't your team anymore. And I think one of the things in the book that is so profound is that Jim Harbaugh, when Michigan won a national championship a year ago, he was able to keep that core group, J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Mike Sanistro, all these really talented, committed Michigan men that could have gone into the portal or gone to the pros. They stuck around because of Coach Harbaugh. Coach Harbaugh, as we report in the book, had this offer on the table from Denver Broncos, the Walmart money, a phenomenal offer, millions and millions and millions of dollars. But Jim stuck around, and because of that, he got the loyalty of those Michigan men who decided that they wanted to come back for one last shot at a national championship, and that's what they did. And so, I think that's one of my favorite parts of the book is that sometimes it's not all about the money. Sometimes it's about being part of a university like the University of Michigan that in the end has a greater good than just the short-term advantage of an NIL deal.
Well, yeah, uh, several thoughts come to mind. Had the pleasure of speaking with late Greg Harden, the famous
Oh, yeah.
University of Michigan athletics counselor. when he talking about his last book, and he said, "Boy, I'm glad I retired before all this NIL stuff happened."
Yeah.
And also, yeah, there's the last chapter in your book, Dominoes.
Yeah.
It's reflective of how uh, how this coach goes here, and this coach there. It's, yeah, like you said, dominoes, because the we can maybe touch on Jimmy Sexton, the agent, how everything just the price goes up and everybody moves around, and everybody just gets mad. The athletes get
You
mad.
think about, but that's a beautiful name for it, Dominoes, because when Nick, and I've known Nick since his time, Nick Saban, since his time with the Miami Dolphins. I did a 60 Minutes piece on him. I did a 3-part series for The Athletic. I have great respect for Nick. But when he decided to retire, and there's a chapter on Julian Sayin, the quarterback who's now at Ohio State, who was singularly focused on the top quarterback in the class of 2024. All he wanted to do was come to Alabama to be coached by Nick, to be developed by Nick, to be the next great quarterback in the line of all these great Alabama quarterbacks. And he goes in there, he literally is on his first day of classes. He's got a 3 o'clock sports management class. At 4 o'clock, he walks into a team meeting. By 4:04, Nick has announced to the team that he's going to retire, and Julian is like lost. And when Kalen DeBoer came in, there's this very dramatic moment where Julian waits outside his office and finally gets in after 90 minutes, and the first words out of Kalen DeBoer's mouth are, "Well, you're going to be great here. You know, we have a great offense." And then he says to him, "So how do you spell your last name again?" And this is the #1 quarterback in the class of 2024. You don't even know how to spell this kid's last name. So Julian ends up at Ohio State, but that's where the dominoes fell. Literally, when Nick retires on Wednesday, by Friday, Kalen DeBoer, who is at Washington, is the new head coach at Alabama. Jed Fish, who we have this chapter called Raising Arizona, who took the struggling, dismal, dysfunctional Arizona football program, and in 3 years takes it to the Alamo Bowl and beats out Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. Well, by Saturday, Jed is now the head coach at Washington. So DeBoer leaves Washington. On Friday, he's hired at Alabama. By Saturday, Jed is the new coach at Washington for a couple of $1 million more than he was making at $3 million more than he was making at Arizona. But then boom, 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 boom. There were, I think Yahoo Sports did the math. Just on Nick's retirement announcement alone, leaving Alabama, there were like 400 plus changes in college football
Wow.
programs where assistants and staff members move from one program to another. And that's where you mentioned Jimmy Sexton. Jimmy Sexton was in the middle of all this. We call him the power broker. That's the name of the chapter. John wrote an incredible chapter. Jimmy Sexton is outside of pick your coaches. Ryan Day, Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher, um, uh, Dabo Sweeney, people like that. Harbaugh, when he was at Michigan. Jimmy's probably the most powerful. He certainly is the most powerful outside agent, outside coach in college football. And what happened was, when Nick retired, as you know, Dan, played perfectly into Jimmy Sexton's world, where he's now negotiating deals for Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Oh, Sark's going to go to He might go to Alabama because he was there, or the Florida State coach might go to Alabama, and he's just jacking up their prices and extending their deals. And what you learn in college sports right now, it's really three things. It's self-interest, it's greed, and it's money. And I think money would be the number one thing, because in the end, college football is really about the money. It's about the playoffs, and it's about NIL money, and it's about grant of rights money and everything else. And that's what John and I really tried to do in our book, was explain how self-interest and greed and money play into this new world. And until that, my belief is until greed and self-interest take a secondary seat, secondary role, we're going to witness what we're witnessing right now. It's not going to change. Eventually, it'll get settled in the courts, but you're looking at 3, 4, 5 years before this stuff settles out, and it could be Armageddon by the time it does.
Well, of the costs, I mean, if you're paying that much for coaches, if you're paying that much for players, it just you're only fewer and fewer places are going to be able to afford to field a team.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I saw something today. I mean, Texas has more money than God when it comes to their football program. Their athletic department, I think the number was, spent $327 million, the biggest budget in the history of college sports, to fund their athletic program, not just the football program, but their entire athletic program. And they made, let's say it was 325, they made 332. They made 7 million on 325. So you think about the narrow margins for these schools. Ohio State just this week admitted
Yeah, they lost money.
they lost 32 million on their, and they're at the top, they're at the upper echelon. Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Oregon, Georgia, pick your school. Texas A&M, they have unlimited amounts of money. When they want to win a national championship, they will bring whatever they have to bring to the table. But when you think about these margins now, how in the world Ohio State lost 30 million with a stadium that's got 100,000 plus. They win a national championship. Yes, they spent 20 million on NIL, but the thing is, they also have 30 sports. They've got as many sports as any intercollegiate athletic program in the country. So what's going to happen there in the future? And this is where I was at a thing last night in New York City with a lot of people that are very involved in Division I baseball. And they're like, what's the future look like? I'm like, it doesn't look good. You know, you've got 35 guys on a Division I baseball team, and okay, um, your money for revenue sharing next year is going to be 20 million. You can afford that. 90% of that's going to go to football and basketball. So that's 18 million. So where's the other 2 million going? It's going to go to maybe your women's softball team, or your lacrosse team, or your field hockey team. Where does baseball fit into that? It doesn't. Tennis, swimming, those non-revenue sports going forward are endangered species. And until some of these national governing bodies, these NGOs, national governing organizations, they decide that they want to start to fund some of this stuff, because that's where their Olympians are coming from. I can see schools just saying, you know what, we don't have track and field anymore. We don't have baseball anymore. We don't have swimming, men's and women's swimming anymore. especially if you were, let's say you were Cal or Stanford, and those are programs that have delivered phenomenal Olympic athletes. But what do they are now? They're in the ACC. So those teams have to travel across the country to compete against NC State, Clemson, North Carolina, pick your school. So it's a Tuesday, it's a Wednesday meet. They got to leave on Tuesday. They have the meet on Wednesday. They fly back Wednesday night. Their kids are dead. They got to go to school on Thursday. They're going to Cal and Berkeley or going to Stanford. What have we done here? But that's when we go back to the idea. It's like it's about money. It's like, you know what? We get $30 million to be in the if you're USC and UCLA, we're on our way to getting $50-60 million a year from the Big Ten contracts. So, the athletes will suffer.
Yeah, yeah. The Pac-12 collapsed because of that.
Yeah.
USC wanted more money, and soon UCLA. Again, that's a great chapter in the book because you detail it. It's like uh, you are there type of
My
reporting.
favorite chapter, Dan. It's my unrealistic. It's like my favorite chapter because John and I did a hell of a lot of really good reporting on that. And Bobby Robbins, who was at the time, the president of the University of Arizona, was leading the charge to try to keep the Pac-12 together. Carol Folt, the USC president, was playing oh yeah, we want to be, we're all together. Bobby's trying to bring, the Big 12 and the ACC into this um, this national conference. And Carol Folt wants nothing to do with it because she doesn't like Baylor and some of the other schools that have religious backgrounds. We're USC and you're not, kind of a thing. Meanwhile, she's talking to the Big Ten and figuring out her exit strategy, lying to the people within the Pac-12 commissioners or excuse me, the presidents and the power brokers there. And it's like, that's why, that's pure greed and it's pure self-interest. And when you realize that that was the driving force of the destruction of a 108-year-old conference, the Conference of Champions, Matt Biondi, Marcus Allen, you pick them, the greatest athletes that ever came out of the West Coast. And now what you have you know, a, mm, a drive-by kind of a conference there now with the Mountain West schools and stuff, but you're so right. It's like that to me was a absolute perfect example of where we are now in college sports. It's every man for himself. And you can say A and say B, but in the end, you're going to do what's the best for your institution. And Folk basically said, you know what? I don't care if we have to travel across the country to play at Rutgers or Maryland or whatever. That grant of rights money down the line, 50, 60, $70 million coming out of the Big Ten with the Fox contracts, the ESPN, CBS. In the end, that was the destructive force of that conference. And it was just really sad to see. I mean, I spent my college years in San Diego, and those Pac-12 teams, those were amazing. UCLA and their basketball, and USC and football, and Stanford and swimming and volleyball. And it's sad to see. But that's what it is right now. And that's unfortunate because, as I said before, when it's every man for himself, when all you're thinking about is your own self-interest, and you don't have for all the things that Charlie Baker, the president, has tried to do, and whatever Congress is trying to do, when it's every man for himself, um, and it's all about the money, this is the kind of chaos that you see, and it's not healthy in any way, shape, or form for the future of college sports.
Well, yeah, I always look forward to the Rose Bowls in the past because it was a rivalry.
Yeah,
There, you didn't always play USC, you didn't always play the West Coast teams, so it was a rivalry, something you could cheer for, get behind. Uh, and uh, and also, I was in prep for this talk. I listened to some of your previous interviews, and you talked about how the smaller colleges, because of all these consolidations, the smaller colleges, they don't get a chance to play big colleges, and that's a big part of their budget. And I also would cite the example of when Appalachian State beat Michigan, that put them on the map.
yeah. And Michigan won't do that anymore because it's not in Michigan's interest to do that. I'm close to some of the people. I played baseball before I went to San Diego State. I played baseball at Central Michigan, and I know those people very well. Central Michigan is in the Mid-American Conference. You know, it's a quality D1 program in that middle tier. Well, they would play two, basically what they're called the guarantee games. They might play Notre Dame, they might play UCLA, they'll play Michigan, but they would be paid, you know, $1.5 million to $2 million to go and basically take a beating. Sometimes they'd win, but most of the times they'd lose. But the $2 million was a enormous boost to their overall athletic department budget and their football budget. Now because of this consolidation and because of um, what's going on in college football, they're going to lose one of those guarantee games. So there goes $2 million out the window for Central Michigan. At the same time, because they're, you know, in that, not the Power 4 or 5 conferences, but they're a Division I program. They have to figure out how much of this $20 million a year rev share that they have to do with their athletes. And they don't have A, the alumni base, and B, the um, grant of rights money. Mid-American Conference, if Central Michigan's getting $1 million a year for their grant of rights money, I'd be shocked. It's a little bit more, but that's a drop in the bucket when you're talking about, okay, how do we fund this revenue share out of the House settlement where we have to pay these kids for all the issues that we've had in the past for name, image, and likeness? They don't have that money. So what does Central Michigan do? Central Michigan has to figure out, are they're not going to be a major player anymore. So what do? Okay, we're going to play Toledo, we're going to play Bowling Green, we're going to play Western Michigan, we're going to play Eastern Michigan, we're going to play these mid-American schools, and we're going to be Northern Illinois. We're going to be content to just be in the second tier of schools, and we can no longer compete in that world of so-called big-time college athletics. And so what happens? You start to figure out, do we have to cut sports? Yes, they'll probably end up cutting sports. Well, the baseball team, the lacrosse team, the field hockey team, the swimming team, are they going to be casualties of this? I would say down the line, yes, they are. Cleveland State, Sonoma State, just this week announced they're on their way to cutting in their entire athletic department. That's just the what do you call it? Like the bird in the bird cage, you know,
In the coal
yeah,
mine.
the canary in the bird cage. Those are the canaries that are basically falling over right now. And you look down the road 4 or 5 years, I can see a lot of schools that are in the Sun Belt or, in these really interesting, well-respected conferences that can just no longer deal with the economics of college sports. And they're just going to say, you know what, we're just going to be a college. We're not going to have big time college sports anymore. Maybe we just join together with these other conferences and just compete, and our alumni can show up, and if they want to have, they want to donate, but we're no longer in that game anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Just want
Do I
to,
sound like really like a downer here? I mean, it's like I feel bad about it, but that's kind of how I feel.
no, you're being realistic. You know the
Yeah,
facts. You have the emotion, like you said, you know the people at Central Michigan and you feel for
I
them.
feel for them. I mean, I was on the phone with the president of Central Michigan, the athletic director, some of their biggest donors, their football coach, and they're like, what do we do? And it was a little bit of you're kind of like on a spaceship where you don't know where it's headed right now. And I would suggest that you might want to cut back or figure out something else because the the old days and the old ways of doing things, they no longer apply. And that's sad because, Central won national championships in baseball when before I got there, and it was a very good baseball team. And they had, when Danny Roundfeld was there, they had a really powerful basketball team. They could compete, not in the Power Fours, but on a really exciting level where you win a Mid-American Conference. Herb Dramedy, he was a great coach there.
Yeah,
Roy Kramer, he became the athletic director at Vanderbilt and then became the commissioner of the SEC. They have a great athletic history there, but that athletic history now is at risk. And that's sad because they're collateral damage in a lot of ways to what's going on in big time sports.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Want to touch on some few more topics. College foot. What do you think of the college football playoff, the recent one?
So interesting. When you're in the media, as I was for a very long time, to go to 12 was a big deal. Everybody was like, oh my God, it's 12. Four was good and now it's 12 and blah, blah, blah. And the first round games where the blowouts were, if you, I won't say everybody, but my business now is very much of a hot take business. So you need to get on your phone and you need to, have a um, hot take about what happened 15 minutes ago and put it out on social media. And the immediate reaction was like, oh, this is ridiculous. These teams are getting blown out. Why do we go to 12? Nobody's going to watch this. Well, then you went to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and you watched Arizona State, and you watched Boise State, and then you watched, Texas and Ohio State, and you watched these semifinal games and these quarterfinal games, which were riveting. And then you watch the national championship game where you have two power programs in Notre Dame and Ohio State going head to head. I thought it was fantastic. The numbers, the 22 million that they got was not maybe what they expected, ESPN expected, but overall, it was a complete winner for ESPN. When you think about whatever they were paying in the billions of dollars overall, when you spread that across all of their platforms and all of their ways to monetize the playoffs, um, it was a surefire winner for ESPN, and I love those games. And I thought I'm not in favor. If you think about a college football season now, It was the longest college football season in history. I don't forget the number of days, but it was really long, 147, I think, whatever it was. But it was from August to September to October to November to December to January. So that's the teams that are getting into the semifinals and the finals. Those teams are competing for 5 months at a time in which they're still trying to go to school, student athlete. And then no sooner are they finished with that, they get about 3 or 4, maybe 4 weeks off, 5 weeks off, and then they're into winter conditioning. Then they're into spring practice, and then they're into the training camp, and then they're into the fall season again. And it's this cycle that just is continuing. So I think about, it's no longer student athlete, it's athlete student, unquestionably. And I just think if they're going to add any more than 12 and you start to go, oh, it's now 16, it's like they're talking now about March Madness going from 68 to 72. The only reason they're doing that is because CBS and Turner want more games so they can put more advertising against it. In the NCAA, which is wholly dependent on March Madness and college basketball, that is the sole reason that they have $1 billion a year in their budget, because that's what's coming from CBS and Turner. They get nothing out of the college football playoffs. That's very separate. It goes to the conferences, it goes to the CFP. So I foresee where, yeah, it'll be, March Madness will be 72 teams now. Did they go to 16? Why? Because people think that the 13th team is better than, or not as good as the 15th team. Again, I go back to the holy grail here, and it's money. The one thing you mentioned unrealistic, and that, Dan, you mentioned that Pac-12 chapter, the driving force behind that decision for those schools to basically blow up that conference was nothing about other than money. When Fox came in and said, oh, well, we want a footprint on the West Coast, and we'll give you each school 30 million. And then when Oregon and Washington came in and they said, we'll give you guys 30 million. When you're trying to balance budgets, $30 million, soon to be 50, 60, 70 million in the next deal, that's very, very convincing.
And since Dearborn is fairly close to Ann Arbor, and I live near Belleville, want to touch on U of M couple questions. In your reporting, from what you found out, did Coach Harbaugh have any choice in leaving for the NFL?
No, I don't think he had any choice at all. I think he was caught squeezed between a school he absolutely loved, program he loved, Michigan, total Michigan man, in a process he absolutely hated, which was the enforcement process. And I know those enforcement people. I know John Duncan, who's the head of the enforcement staff. I'm very familiar with how they operate over the years. And I think you saw today, there was a 130 something page report that Michigan responded to the allegations, basically saying that the NCAA overreached, that the Connor Stallions thing was just Connor Stallions. It wasn't Sharon Moore. It wasn't this insidious inside operation. I've known Jim going back to 1985 when he was a quarterback for the Bears. Excuse me, Mike Ditka's last year. So it would have been like 90. And when he was the quarterback, and And then when I came to Ann Arbor and I spent time with them and I got to know people within the Michigan, I've known people within the Michigan administration, the athletic department. So I had what I would consider to be unusual access, or this kind of access that I need in order to tell these kinds of stories. And then certainly Tom Mars, who was Jim's attorney, is a brilliant litigator and really a force for change within the NCAA environment. But to try to depict what Jim was going through in the original allegations, the cheeseburger, did he know? Did he not know? When they showed him the receipts, he said, "Oh, I must have been there because who has a hamburger at Saturday morning for breakfast?" And the thing about the NCAA enforcement staff is that you're on their terms. Um, do they believe you or do they not believe you? And when they say that you've lied, and maybe you just didn't remember, I don't know. Ask me what I did 3 weeks ago. Did you go to this restaurant and what did you order? I don't remember what I would have ordered. And then they show me a receipt and they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I ordered." But the decision, the distinction with the difference was Jim didn't remember. That's what he said continuously. The NCAA said he lied. And so who's to believe what? But when you're in the Committee on Infractions, you're in their world. And to me, there's great quotes in the chapter in leading to Jim's decision to depart, where Tom Mars, his attorney, says, "I told him not once, not twice, but more than twice, I can't see any reason that you would stay here if you have an opportunity to go to the National Football League." Now, this is the same guy, as I mentioned before, that turned down multiple millions of dollars from the Broncos. And when they stuck 16 million over 5 years for Jim to go to the Chargers, what would you do? Now, people have criticized Jim and said, "Oh, you abandoned," like in these talking heads, "you abandoned Michigan." Brett Bielema today, "Why did you leave?" The Illinois coach. Such bullshit. I think Jim did the right thing. He left after winning a national championship. He stuck around to be with those players. You saw what happened. He got a 4-year show cause penalty, which means, he's basically impossible to hire as a head football coach in college football. To me, that was so vindictive by the Committee on Infractions and the head of the Committee on Infractions, who never believed anything that came out of Jim's mouth. So, to me, it was one of the most, I really loved writing those chapters because I was deeply embedded in the reporting. And that's, for people that know my work, that's what I do. I kind of get into those worlds and I peel the onion away and peel it away and peel it away. So I'm not guessing about what I'm writing about. I'm writing scenes and I'm writing moments that are based on some very detailed, in-depth reporting that I've done and talking to people that were in the room, or have the documents to back up what I'm saying. And to me, as sad as it was for Michigan and amongst the faithful that loved Jim, he didn't have a choice. It was, if he stuck around and they hit him with that show cause, and you saw the response literally today from Michigan, that's going to be a legal battle that's going to be very interesting to watch, because Michigan has more than enough money to fight the NCAA. The problem is you're in their courts. You're going to go before the Committee on Infractions. Committee on Infractions, the history there is you're basically, in the court of last resort. You're not gonna win that. But God bless them, in the court of public opinion, they may very well win it.
Well, I want to say I get the sense that you're a very empathic person, or you treat people fairly, and yeah, Oh, yeah, I also saw that. I printed out this front page article in the Detroit News about it. So, and then the other thing is uh, living near Belleville and the how Bryce Underwood was
Yeah.
was uh, uh, enticed to come to the university. There was a little mention in the local Belleville paper today that Mr. Underwood picked up his new Chevy Tahoe.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
as,
Well, when you're the Ellisons, and it's interesting because I just want to go back for 1 second when you said, and I want to make a statement about something is a lot of what I do, people that know my reporting and have followed me over the years, I have this phrase, trust equals access equals information. So when you build up trust, and I know the mainstream media right now is under attack, but I grew up in a different era. I grew up in the Watergate era, Woodward and Bernstein. One of my heroes was David Halberstam.
oh yeah.
Uh, when I went to Losser High School, I remember when I was a junior in the summer of my junior year, I sat in my basement in Bloomfield Hills and read, the best and the brightest, and I was blown away by the reporting about the Vietnam War. And I was fortunate enough to meet David, and he said some very nice things about me. He called me an uncommon reporter, which still to this day puts chills in my arms. Um, so that's what has driven me over the years is that trust. When you build trust with Bill Belichick, when you build trust with Nick Saban, when you build trust with pick your person. I mean, how I got to Julian Sand was the quarterback, Carlsbad High School, now at Ohio State, was built around the trust that I had built in the system with his high school coach, Thad McNeil. So trust equals access equals information. And that's what the price is built on, both John Talty and myself. John as I said, is a younger me, but he's developed a very strong reputation. When I say A, I do A. I don't do B or C. And that's what I tell journalism students. I said, you know what? If you want to make a career of journalism, when you say A, you do A. You might say A and you do B or C, and you're going to get away with that one or two times, maybe three times. And you might break through and become a person, an it person for a little while. But if you operate under those kinds of terms, sooner or later your career is gonna fail because people talk. And in the world that I live in, when I want to get access to something, the person that I'm talking to, like when I wanted to get access to Nick Saban when he was at Miami and I was at CBS Sports, and Nick didn't want to do this 4-part series that the NFL Today wanted to do, I said to him, call Bill, call Belichick. And Bill said, you can trust him because I had done so many Patriot games. Well, when Bill puts that stamp of approval, I opened the door to Nick, and that opened the door to a 60 Minutes piece and the Athletic piece. So my point is that, in the day and age that we live in now, where the mainstream media gets just getting obliterated day and day in and day out, um, this book is built on old school reporting. It's built on relationships that get you into places that allow you to see things and hear things that allow the reader to go, oh, so that's how it works. That's how he feels. And it's not me guessing about it. It's not me postulating or hypothesizing about it. It's me in the room. It's John in the room. And that's where these books really stand the test of time. Tiger Woods, The System, Billy Walters' book, um, Raw Recruits. Those books over time have stood the test of time because you feel like you're in the moment with them. And that is really important to me. Like you're talking about Susan Morrison in this Lauren Michaels book. I just read this review. It's phenomenal, because she's in the moment with all these SNL people. And Lauren opens up to her about what he went through to 50 years of SNL. That's the kind of stuff that Halberstam did, that Woodward and Bernstein did, God, Robert Caro did. These people that are my heroes in my journalistic life, and that's what we're losing right now. And I think that takes a certain amount of, and I'll get off the soapbox in just a second, but it takes a certain amount of passion. I'm 71 years old. I've been doing this a long time, but I still love what I do. I've never felt like I've ever worked in my life. I've always felt like I found a passion in life. And that's why these books stand out the way they do, because you invest so much of yourself building these relationships, and then these people open the door for you. And then when you tell the story in the way that they feel is fair, then they tell somebody else and they say, oh, you know what? You can trust Armen. You can trust him. You should let him in. It'll be good for you. And that means the world to me, because that trust is hard to build, but it's really one of the most treasured things I have journalistically, certain in my life.
Yeah, you if you can find something, find something to do for a living that's fun. Like I love doing these talks because I can share my passion, share creativity. Then it's not work. And yeah, this is what I love about all your material, be it video, be it books. Yeah, I know that you're in the room. There's no other way. There's
No,
no
there's
other
no other
way
way. No.
that,
And
that
it's like,
you.
Dan, you showed up tonight. You did what you had to do. You understand me. You did your reporting. You did your research. You showed up prepared. Like when I showed up in 60-minute interviews, I knew more about the person, so oftentimes that I was sitting across, than the person did. I knew things about them because I had done so much research and my producers had done that. And that's what I respect. I respect when people show up and are professionals, and that's that, I live in a world where journalism is a profession. What you do is a profession. And when I watch some of the stuff that happens now on X and other places, the disrespect for journalism and the work that the White House correspondents do, that were just, excuse my French, shit on yesterday by people who have very different opinions about whether you're on one side or the other. And that's all filtering into the mainstream mindset right now. And I'm like, really? Do you have any understanding about how these people do their job and how much they care about what they put on the air every night? No, you just sit at home and spew stuff out. And because you have a lot of followers, it gets repeated and repeated and repeated. And then mainstream media, so-called mainstream media, whatever that means, it could be, is TMZ mainstream media? Is the National Enquirer mainstream media? Is the New York Times, the Atlantic, is that mainstream media? It's all one big thing now. And we get lumped into this world of that I don't really understand right now. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, yeah. So briefly, uh, collect. Just last thing about collectives with Bryce Underwood about how they could get him to pay the $10 million
Well, I
to.
mean, when you have Ellison money, Larry Ellison's wife, Michigan graduate, I know for a fact that the NIL program at Michigan was really, I don't want to say a disaster, but it was very scattered. They had at least five different collectives, whether it was Stadium in Maine, whether it was Champion Circle, whether it was this, that, or the other thing. And Ward Manuel, as we report in the book, was very reluctant to embrace NIL going on, the athletic director, early on. And Michigan got behind the eight ball. And when Jim left, I think Jim was frustrated by the fact that there wasn't a cohesive. You can't have five collectives. You have to have one collective that your 600 plus thousand living alumni say, okay, if I want to support U of M football, where do I give my money? I'm giving it to Stadium Maine. I'm giving it to Champion Circle. I'm giving to Valiant. What am I doing here? Where's this money going? So I think when the Ellisons came in and they just go, okay, we're going to give this money. We think it went to Champion Circle. It was $10 million. That buys a lot of football, a lot of football players. And, I hope Bryce turns out to be what everybody expects him and hopes him to be. But as a freshman coming into that program, he's not going to start next year, I doubt. It's just a lot. When that number is attached to you might as well have it on the back of your uniform. And that's a problem. I think when teams can spread that money out and then there's some sort of a democratic system to say, you know what, you're Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, you're worth $4 million to this program. You're JJ McCarthy at Michigan, you're Blake Corum, you're worth X amount of dollars. But when you get that money coming in instead of earning it on the field, it just raises a lot of issues in the locker room. And hopefully this kid, I don't know him. He seems, like he's got his feet underneath him. But this is big time, big boy football. And, from one quarter to the next, one game to the next, you're going to be judged. And, I wish him the best because I love that program. I think Michigan is, it's the gold standard as far as the brand is concerned. But this is all going to play out, I think, in a very interesting way, and nobody knows yet what the final result is going to be.
No, no. I mean, there is another quarterback in the room there, and they're going to compete, and who knows?
Hey, it's the way it is. I mean, you could have 10 million and this guy could show up and go, you know what? I mean, Julian Sayin went to Ohio State. He's a big part of our book, The Price. He's a generational talent. He's the heir apparent to Will Howard. He'll probably start next year, but God, I mean, I don't know, I don't know if I'd want to be 20 years old and have that on my shoulders. So we'll see.
No, no. Well, I kept Mr. Keteyian longer than we promised to him. If somebody has a quick question online, we'll just keep it to a question. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. All right. So yeah, no one's got any questions.
All right, Dan. Thank you
So,
so much for tonight.
oh,
And
thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate you doing it.
You're
So
welcome. Talk
have a
again.
good, have a good night.
All right. Thank you.